Hey, everybody. Wow, let's see, Austria. I thought it said Australia at first. Well, I was going to say, woo, good for you. Well, welcome, everybody. Glad to see so many folks joining live. That's fabulous. It's been pretty active in the chat already, starting in the middle of the night last night. So as we're getting started here, first of all, if you could just let me know someone that you can hear my audio, that would be great. Sometimes people have audio trouble. Just if you can hear me in the chat, give me a thumbs up on the audio. Great. Okay, it looks like at least one person can hear me. So if anybody, great. Thank you. Okay, good. So if you folks who can hear me could do me a favor, if you see anybody in the chat complaining about no audio or choppy video or something, maybe suggest that they refresh the browser or use Chrome or something like that. So if someone comes in later and I'm not watching the chat, that usually solves it. If they either use Chrome instead of whatever else they're using, or sometimes if you just refresh the browser, it'll clear up the audio or video problems. 5x5, right on. Cool. All right. So we've got a ton of stuff to cover today, but I do want to give you some housekeeping just so everybody understands what's going on. While people are joining, if you could share in the chat, what's your number one challenge or frustration with writing proposals? I'd love to get a kind of a feel for that while people are still joining. And I'll just go through the boring stuff while people are typing that up. So what's your number one challenge or frustration with regard to writing proposals? And while you're putting that into the chat, I'll let folks know that we're going to cover a ton of territory today. If you're on my email list, I think I said this would be 30 or 40 minutes of content. It might be a little bit longer than that, but I can stay as long as you can stay. I think Crowdcast kicks us off after 2 hours or something. So we're going to cover three big areas of proposal related content. And I'm going to take questions in between each section. And then at the end, any big questions that are left over, I'll just stay around and answer questions until everyone leaves or we get kicked out. If you do have questions, please put them in the Ask a Question tab. It might be called the Q&A tab if you're on mobile, but put your questions in there so people can vote them up and down, and then I'll answer the ones at the top of the list as we go through. Like I said, I'll jump in there a few times throughout, and then at the end, just take general questions about it. All right. Check my notes here. Oh, right. The webinar will be available as a replay for a couple days after this. So if you can't stay for the whole event, then you can come back later. It'll be at the same URL, and you can log in and rewatch or watch the pieces that you didn't see yet. If you'd like to share it with people, that's fine too. It won't be up forever. So if you want to do that, let them know that it's got a expiration date on it. It'll probably be up for about 48 hours. Okay, so this content is pulled from the pricing seminar, which launches today. I'm not going to be pitching that to you. I just want to let you know that this is a full week of content that I'm going to compress into a 1 hour segment. So we're going to hit the high notes. You're going to get a lot of value out of it, I'm sure. And at the end, if you want to sign up for the pricing seminar, I'll give you a coupon, but we're not going to talk about that. I don't even have time to pitch you on that. It's really all going to be all about the content and mostly the Q&A, because there's so much to cover. I really want to get your specific questions and try and help people with individual questions. All right. I can already see there are 5 questions. That's fabulous. So I'm going to cut over to slides and change my screen configuration here. All right. Okay, so again, please, you should be able to see a big black slide. Hopefully, if somebody can just let me know in the chat that is what you can see. It should say how to write better proposals. And when I switch over to the slides, I'm not going to be able to see the chat, so bear with me on that. Okay, so let's start off by why should anybody care about this? I can see people we're adding sort of frustrations and challenges about their proposals going into a black hole or not knowing how to scope things and these sorts of things. I hear all kinds of complaints about writing proposals for custom work, whether it's software development or video production or copywriting, it doesn't matter. When you're doing creative work and people need some kind of price, a client needs some kind of a price or an estimate or something, you meet with them and you put together a proposal and then you send it to them, and sometimes it just disappears. They don't get back to you. They just totally ghost you, or they'll come back and say, we need a better price, or that there's just so many things that can happen. It's so frustrating. It can take forever to write them. I mean, in the dev space, I've seen proposals that were 50 pages long, 100 pages long. What we're going to talk about today is a simple, repeatable way to write a proposal that should max out about 5 pages, no matter how big the project is. And what this will do is it will decrease the amount of effort it takes you to create a proposal. Done well, it will increase your close rate, even if you have higher prices. And we're going to talk at the end specifically about pricing and using value pricing to maximize your project fees. So if writing proposals feels like torture, you're in the right place. The agenda for today it's the 3 starting videos from the pricing seminar. It's anatomy of a project proposal, which is going to be very straightforward. These are the parts of the proposal, and I'm going to focus in today specifically on the 3 really important pieces. Then we're going to talk about conducting a sales interview. This is the thing that happens before you write the proposal and is perhaps the most important piece. This will make or break your ability to write a good proposal, having a good sales meeting first. And then lastly, we're going to talk about setting project prices. There's books and books and books about this, but I'm going to touch on the big conceptual pieces that you should keep in mind when you're trying to give fixed prices for project work. And if people have questions about what to do if if they are still doing hourly and want to find a way to transition into something like that, we can handle that in the Q&A. It depends on who's here. All right. Before I jump into the first big section, I just want to check back. I hope everybody can see the slides. Yes, slide with thumbnails on the left. Perfect. All right. So anatomy of a project proposal. Probably a lot of people on this call have been on my mailing list for a long time and are aware of my 5-page proposal template. I've been using it for over a decade, and it's been super successful for me. I use the same exact format with all of my coaching students. The same template works for everyone, and probably a lot of people here have already seen that template. It's got 6 sections: the cover letter, the situation appraisal, project options, risks and assumptions, why me, and payment and terms. 3 of these are pretty straightforward. The cover letter, it's just, it's boilerplate, thanks for your time on the phone the other day. This is a quote, not an estimate, so on and so forth. Risks and assumptions, there's just what it says on the tin. When you have risks and assumptions in a project where there's some things that could blow up in your face, or ways that the client could accidentally or on purpose sabotage a project, that would go in the risks and assumptions. And then the why me section is just a little bit about, it's a little pitch for yourself about why you're uniquely qualified to work with this client on this particular project. So I think 1, 4, and 5, kind of obvious. In the proposal template, you will have boilerplate examples of these, but those are pretty obvious. 2, 3, and 6, situation appraisal, project options, and payment and terms, those are tricky. And I think they're pretty unusual, the way that I approach them. I think it's not the way that most people do it, and I think those are the important ones that we're going to cover today, the most important sections. All right, the situation appraisal. So after the cover letter, you'd have this probably a half a page to 3/4 of a page. Maybe I've honestly never done one that was a full page long. The situation appraisal is 3 main parts. It's, in plain English, the current situation that the client is in. They're in some kind of situation that is not ideal, which is why they're talking to you. They are spending time and paying attention and spending time spending They are investing in a conversation with you or a search for someone like you. Something's wrong, and they're burning resources to try and find someone to help them fix this thing that's wrong. So you want to find out what their current situation is. It could be something like, you reached out, big Acme company has a website and it's desktop only, and you're noticing that traffic is dramatically increasing on from mobile devices, and it's the traffic there is not converting. That's their current situation. Or maybe they've got maybe they run an enterprise SaaS and they want to book more demos. And, you've got this enterprise SaaS product, and you're not getting enough demos booked. You're getting lots of traffic to your site, but nobody's signing up for the free demos. That's their current situation. Their desired future state is the way they want things to be in the future. So what does a win look like? What are the things that they would like to have changed? They want more downloads or more signups for demos, more downloads of their lead magnet. They want a responsive web design so that they're getting more conversions on their mobile site. Whatever the thing is, they're in a current situation that they don't like, and there's a desired future situation that they can imagine, this desired future state that they want to achieve or reach, some kind of goal. And then the third piece of this is there's your perceived contribution to that goal. So it might just be a piece. It'll usually be just a piece of a contribution to this goal. Like, maybe their current situation is sales are down because mobile traffic just isn't converting the way desktop traffic was. And what they want is increased sales on mobile. And maybe you can't control all of that. Maybe there's some product issues. There could be a lot of things involved. You want to be able to say in the proposal, right in the situation appraisal, what they think your contribution to this desired outcome might be. And they'll know it. That's why they called you. So it's something that you can get out of them in the sales meeting. We're going to talk about that in the next section. So this situation appraisal is often not great. I review a lot of proposals for people, and I'll go through, and a lot of times there's tons of jargon, or it's very salesy, or there's persuasive words or hyperbole. It should be plain English that a 6-year-old would understand. Your website doesn't work that great based on these metrics or whatever the problem is. You'd like it to work better, and these are the things that you would measure to know that it was working better. And you called me because I'm an expert at this particular thing. So it's very straightforward. It should only be about 3 or 4, sentences for each one of these. So you end up with about 9 to maybe 16 or 17, 18 sentences total. And it's like maybe a half a page or 3/4 of a page. Real clear, so that someone who didn't even meet with you from the client side could read this and be like, oh yeah, that's true. We're in this situation. It'd be great if we were in this desired future state. And this person apparently is an expert at this piece of it. Should be very, very straightforward. All right, the next big important piece of the proposal is the project options. And it should always be 3. There's tons of psychology that backs this up. You should always give them 3 options, not 2, not 4, and definitely not 1. If you only give them 1 option, no options, if you only give them 1 potential solution, then it's like an ultimatum. So instead of thinking, how could we work with you, they're thinking, should we work with you? And people are terrible at, if they look at a price for this only option they have, they're going to want to compare it to something. And if you don't give them something else to compare it to in the other options, they're going to get another quote to compare it to. You don't want that. You want them comparing your option 1 to your option 2 to your option 3, not your only option to 3 other agencies' other options. Always give 3 options. The psychology of 3 specifically is that generally people will go for the middle option. More than 3, they start to get decision paralysis, and less than 3, it's a little too much of an ultimatum. So 3 is perfect. Always do 3. Okay. The 3 options should be incremental. So it's not like 1 or 2 or 3. It's 1 is the base option. 2 is everything from option 1 plus some value-added items or some other kind of deliverable or some other thing. And then 3 is everything from 1 and 2 plus some aftercare or some extra something, so they can't just say, oh, I just want 2, not 1. They're incremental. So you're kind of like walking them up a mental ladder of like, do we want to engage at a low level, a medium level, or a high level with you? The thing about the three levels is sometimes when people do this for the first time, option two is just more of option one, and option three is just more of options one and two. So like option one for a copywriter might be, I'll write a 3,000 word white paper for you that people can download to book, to get their emails so that you can get them on some kind of nurture sequence. Option two is a 6,000 word webinar, a 6,000 word white paper or 2 white papers. And then option three is 3 white papers. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about option one being something that's its own thing. And then option two is a different thing. It's that plus something different. And option three is plus something different yet again. So use the copywriter example. Maybe for someone who wants to write a white paper, I would say option one is I'll work with your people to come up with a messaging strategy, and then you guys do all the writing. Option two might be I'll work with you guys. Option one, so we'll work out a messaging strategy, and then option two is I'll come up with a white paper that you can use as a lead magnet, but you guys post it, you guys do the nurture campaign, you guys do everything after that piece. And then option three might be you do soup to nuts, you do the strategy, you write the white paper, and you write the entire nurture campaign, you write scripts for webinars to drive people to the traffic, you write Facebook ads. So it's more writing, but you're writing different things. You're engaging in a different way with the client as they move up through the three options. All right, this last bullet point is probably the most important, and that is that each option should be benefits focused. What do I mean by that? I mean that it shouldn't just be a list of things you're going to do, actions you're going to undertake on their behalf, or deliverables that you're going to give them. I'll give you you'll get a white paper. It's like, okay, what's the benefit of the white paper? So if option one is I'll sit with you and work with your team and your content experts and come up with a cohesive messaging strategy for the year. Okay, great. What's the outcome? Like, so what? You want to answer the question, so what? So you said what you're going to do, and then the so what, the benefit is the answer to the so what question. So the answer might be so that you're not spinning your wheels or sending out a conflicting message to your audience, or you don't have employees not rowing in the same direction. Whatever the reason, whatever the business benefit of having a strong messaging strategy is, you want to include that in there. So it's not just like, I'm going to do these tasks for you. Then it goes on to connect the dots between those tasks and some beneficial business outcomes. So like it could have its own success metric. Like the success would be that we could interview any writer in-house, any in-house writer at random, and they would all understand the content strategy and the messaging strategy for the year. So that could be a metric that you'd set up and say, okay, everybody's aligned. We know that all of our content creators are aligned on this strategy that you created for us. Okay, so benefits, just to hammer on this because it's really important, everybody leaves it out. Benefits are the answer to the question, so what? So after each option, you say, I'm going to do these things, and you're going to get these deliverables. It's fine to put that in there, but don't focus on that too much. You want to then connect the dots and answer the question, so what? So what if I have this PDF? So what if I have these new features? So what if I have these videos? What's the outcome that I'm looking for? All right. And then the third important section of the proposal is payment and terms. And there's a lot of magic that goes into this section. But there's the three main things. I mean, obviously that you need to give them a way to pay, a way to sign, obvious stuff like that. But in the payment and terms, ideally, in my world, you'd be giving them fixed prices, ideally based on value, but fixed prices nonetheless. And if you do give fixed prices, you can ask for 100% upfront because you're telling them how much it's going to cost. So option one is 10,000, option two is 22,000, option three is 50,000. I need 100% payment upfront to block out the time in my calendar to schedule this. And you can send it to the address below or ACH information or whatever it is. And then on there, you want to include an expiration date. And in general, I would say 14 days expiration date, after which time you can't guarantee pricing or availability. Things change very quickly in business. You don't want someone to take this proposal and then go away for 6 months and then come back with their hair on fire and expect you to just honor it. That's not realistic. It's not a permanent forever and ever amen price tag. Things are going to change for them. Things are going to change for you. The project might not even be valid anymore. So these things work together in a great way. So the fixed prices enables you to ask for 100% upfront, and asking for 100% upfront allows you to negotiate. So it gives you something to negotiate and compromise on other than the price. So if you say, it's going to be $22,000 for option 2, and they're like, yeah, we really want that option 2, and it seems reasonable, but 100% upfront, it seems like a big payment. You say, well, what do you propose? And they say, well, what about 50-50? And we could talk about that too. But the idea of asking for 100% upfront is, well, first of all, a lot of people will just give it to you. And second of all, it gives you something to negotiate if other than the price, so that you can make a compromise, you can make a concession to them, and not have to lower your prices. I would never, ever lower my prices after I send a proposal. And then the expiration date is really important, because if you have it, then it gives you a follow-up sequence. So it gives you things to say. So you send it to them. It's got a 14-day expiration. So a few days later, you haven't heard anything from them. You say, hey, just want to make sure that you received the proposal. You're not still waiting for it from me. It got lost in your inbox or something. So just hit reply and let me know that you got it. I understand you're busy. You haven't had time to read it maybe, but just let me know that you got it. Still haven't heard from them. Now it's the next week. It's been 7 days, and you're like, hey, Bob, just wanted to check in. We've only got, 7 more days before the proposal expires. Let me know what you're planning on doing, or let me know if you have any questions. It gives you these sort of countdown of increasing mounting pressure, where they've invested time and energy into having a conversation with you, and maybe going back and forth about maybe on 1 or 2 calls to talk about the project. So they're somewhat invested in this. And now you're kind of not threatening, but you're making them aware of the fact that that investment is going to be lost potentially if they go past the expiration date, because now you're not going to be available, or you're not going to guarantee the prices. It puts some pressure on them, and it makes it really, really clear that they can't just come back in 6 months and say, oh yeah, we're ready, let's go. So it's critical to have that expiration date, as simple as it is. Okay, so I flew through that stuff. I know I touched on all the big points. I'm sure you have questions. So what I'm going to do is jump back to Crowdcast and see what questions we have that are related to this. This first piece. Let me see here. I think I have to stop sharing. All right, questions, fabulous. See some voting. Okay, there's 15 questions here. I'm not going to be able to get to these all right now. I'll spend maybe 5-10 minutes or so working on these, and then we'll jump back to the content, and we'll just keep going back and forth like that. First question, do you charge for proposals, needs analysis, roadmap? Well, I wouldn't call a needs analysis or a roadmap a proposal. So what I would say is, no, I don't charge for proposals, but what a proposal looks like for me is almost always one sales meeting. That's it, like 1 hour sales interview, and maybe some follow-up email if I really messed up the sales interview, but that's it. I'm not going to go beyond that. I don't do like deep homework or anything like that about the business. I get all the information from the person in the meeting that I need to write the proposal. If I get to the end of the meeting and I don't feel like it's a good fit, I won't write the proposal, because who wants to do that? It's not fun. So I'll just be like, I don't think there's a good fit here, maybe, but I know someone who maybe would be a better fit. I'll introduce you to them, and you can go talk to them. But if I do feel like at the end that, yeah, this is a reasonable engagement, I'm confident that I could help them move the needle that they want to move, I'll put together a proposal, and it's just going to be short. And it's just going to have these 6 sections in it, and I'm going to have all the language I need from talking to them, so it's not that hard. And we'll get to that in the next section. I would definitely charge for things like needs analysis or roadmaps or those sorts of things, because those have outcomes that are, those could be an option 1 on a larger engagement. So option 1 is do a detailed needs analysis. I'll interview all these people. I'll do all these things. I'll do these activities. And what you'll get out of that is a report, so that you can decide what to do next, or so that you'll have a plan for migrating your services to the cloud, or whatever confidence or clarity that they're looking for, if they place a value on that, then they're going to want it. But you do need to connect the dots between the roadmap or the needs analysis or the architecture diagram or the style guide or whatever that is with some kind of business outcome that they care about, which you would have learned about in the sales interview. All right, that was that one. Let's see, is this timelines? Okay. Next question is, hi, Jonathan. I have a question regarding timelines and or timeframes in proposals. Following Alan Weiss's recommendation, we provide a time frame for each task. For task one, we estimate 45 to 55 day time frame plus a visual timeline. What happens then is that the client always divide the fee for the task by the days provided to calculate a hypothetical, right? So, and someone actually answered this for me already. I covered something, Jonathan covered something similar in a recent email. Maybe you need to find a way to indicate the time frame is calendar time rather than clock time. That's exactly what I would have said. So thank you, Chris, for answering this question for me. But what does it mean? It means that you want to say to them, yes, some clients do need a timeline for a project because they need to, they have other initiatives that maybe need to coincide with a launch or something like that. Like their marketing team is working on a launch for an app that you're building. So it's reasonable for them to want some kind of timelines, but that's not the same thing as a deadline. I don't agree to deadlines, and that's a whole separate conversation. In general, I will not agree to a deadline in general, but I will agree to a timeline. So I'll say to the client, look, we don't know how long this is going to take. This is a big undertaking. It's collaborative. There's blockers on both sides. You guys could drag your feet. Something, one of your employees might get out sick. There's a million factors. We can't control what day it's going to be available. But what I can do for you is start with a timeline that is the most optimistic. Like, we couldn't possibly get this thing done faster than 3 months. There's no way. And if I can break it into a, like a Gantt chart or something of the individual tasks and the blockers and all that, but these are not deadlines. These are not milestones with dates. This is a rough estimate of the fastest possible completion. And it's going to change probably every week. So in our status call every week, we'll give you an update. The timeline is going to get longer and longer and longer until it starts getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So don't count on this, but it's going to get more and more accurate as time goes on. And in fact, you can say to them, this is why we don't charge by the hour, because we don't know how many hours it's going to take. And it would be unfair for us to ask you to make a big purchasing decision without knowing the price. So we take that risk on for you, and and we'll just be on the hook. If it takes longer, you don't have to pay more. Yeah. Let me see if I missed anything there. Yeah, so they won't have anything to divide because the timeline is like a living document. It's just going to keep changing. Flip side. I don't provide timelines and have some potential clients refuse to accept the proposal without them. I've chosen not to work with these types of clients. Is there a better way to handle this? So this could be a deadlines thing, not a timelines thing. So deadlines are different from timelines, as I just described. A timeline is a flexible thing. It's going to change. A deadline, sometimes clients will insist on a deadline because they're used to being nickel and dimed by someone who's on the clock. So they might not actually care about the deadline. It might not be that the deliverable or the project needs to be completed before the next Olympics or something like that, or before a big conference where they're going to be in the trade show. It might just be that they picked some arbitrary deadline because they think that's a way to control their costs because they're used to paying by the hour. If that's the case, then you can say, look, you don't have to worry about the deadline. You don't have to give us these arbitrary deadlines. Our financial interests are aligned. We want to get this done at the highest possible quality as fast as we can, because then it's better for us and it's better for you. So let's dispense with this the deadline issue. If it's actually a timeline issue, then you can see my previous answer, because there's sometimes they do need that because there are other initiatives that need to coincide with this. But they're not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And any non-trivial sized project, it's almost impossible to guarantee some kind of deadline, some launch date. It's like promising a bride that it'll be sunny on her wedding day. Everyone wants it, but you can't promise it because you're not in control of it. All right. Here's an interesting one. I'm a developer from India. Our market is driven by fixed pricing as opposed to hourly billing. I've tried your proposal and somehow the clients always feel the pricing is too high. One reason I think they feel this way is that there's always someone undercutting our work. Not sure how to deal with this. So this can be two things. The first thing is the price is higher than the value. The value is a perception in the buyer's mind of the maximum amount of money that they would spend for what they think they're going to get. You know, your contribution to this thing that they want. So if someone is opposed to a price and they didn't have anyone else to compare it to, then the problem is your price is higher than what it's worth to them. Your price is higher than the value, which means in the future you want to do a more thorough job of uncovering the value, using the why conversation in the sales interview, and we're going to talk about that next. If you're just getting undercut and they're saying, well, you're twice as expensive as the next people, we're just going to go with them, then what you have is a positioning problem, because the client can't see any meaningful difference that they care about between you and the other company. So that's a positioning problem. They see you as apples to apples. You are a web developer. I can get any web developer. I'm just going to get a medium price or a lowish price web developer, and I don't see any good reason why I should pay more for you. So that's a positioning problem. So if you're getting undercut and you're losing business to cheaper competitors, it's because you're not meaningfully different to your buyers. So you need to work on your positioning and build this trust. You have to stand apart, be the go-to agency for whatever it is that you do, or some subset of what you do. And then there will be no competition. If you focus down enough, there's no competition because you're the only person that does it. You're the obvious choice. Okay. So these are great questions. Thanks for this. A couple more that are around proposals, but I'm going to jump back. I'll jump back and tackle those at the end because we do need to get back into the slides. All right. Just a reminder, if you do have questions and you didn't put them in the Q&A, the Ask a Question tab, then please put them in there so I definitely see them. There's a lot of stuff in the chat I'm not going to be able to see while we're still live. I'll go back and read it later, but I won't see it yet. All right, so back to slides. Okay, and I think some of the questions, maybe some of the upcoming ones and some of the ones that we just covered, I think are going to be answered a little bit more or elaborated on in this section because it has to do with the communication before you write the proposal. All right. Okay, so conducting a sales interview. So the premise here is that you've come into communication with someone who's a prospective buyer. They're thinking about hiring you. It could be that you reached out to them and you said, hey, I noticed that you're the kind of client who we generally work with. Would you be interested in jumping on a phone call to see if there's a good fit between our two companies? Or your marketing is good, or and they just find you and say Google search, or they're referred to you by a past client, or some kind of introduction happens and it's like an inbound lead. So either way, the idea of the sales interview is that it's an interview. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. It's not you pitching them and trying to convince them that you're the best option. You don't know that. You don't know you're the best option until after you talk to them. You might be a horrible option. They might be a terrible personality fit for you. They might be totally confused about what it is that they think you offer. So there's nothing to pitch. You want to just ask them questions, keep them talking. They should be talking like 80, 90% of the time. You just keep them talking. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to persuade them. You don't need to convince them. All you need to do is find out the answers to the questions that are going to end up in the proposal, which are what's your current situation, what's your desired future state, and what is it that you think I can contribute to this desired future state. That's basically it. Okay. This feels funny because it feels to them and probably to you that you're basically trying to talk them out of working with you. And in some cases, I've tried to talk people out of doing the project at all, or at least the way that they thought they wanted to do it. So it feels weird. And sometimes there'll be this awkward moment where they're like, do you even want this job? And I'll say, yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm a good fit. I don't want to take your money if I'm not going to be able to improve your business. So that's what I'm trying to find out here. And a good buyer, a good potential client is going to really appreciate that, because they don't, a lot of people have been burned by people who are just like mercenaries, or perhaps desperate for money or whatever it is, and just taking jobs that really they're not the best fit for. So a good client will love that kind of a comment. Okay, so drilling into each one of these three points. When you go into one of these sales interviews, you need to be totally genuinely willing to walk away from the job. Do not go into one of these meetings needing the work. That's a disaster. You'll give off, as Blair Enns says, the stench of desperation. You'll give them all the power. You'll undercut yourself while you're talking. It's really bad. You'll feel nervous. You'll feel like you have butterflies. You just whatever you need to do to gain the confidence to be able to walk away from any given deal, you need to do it. And usually that means either having a bunch of money in the bank, like some runway, or it means you're getting lots of leads. So you can be a little bit picky. As I said before, you want that client to be talking 80 or 90% of the time. So if you imagine like a situation where you go in to see a doctor, the doctor doesn't sit there and tell you how great they are for half of the visit. They say, tell me where it hurts. When did this start happening? Whatever, turn your head and cough. They're just asking these little questions to keep you talking, and so that they can learn more about your situation and what it is, your desired future state. It's very similar. And any kind of attempt to persuade or convince them or engage in hyperbole or anything like that sends a really bad signal. It's just a desperate signal, and it gives them all the power in the negotiating process. You just don't want to do that. If somebody says, gives you a really pointed question like, well, how do we know you're the best person for the job? You'd be like, I don't know that I am. That's what we're trying to figure out. So there's just always turn it back around to, you want to be asking them questions, open-ended questions that they are responding to, and you are trying to gain the confidence through that conversation that you can actually help them. A lot of times they will, speaking of the doctor thing, a lot of times they'll come to you, the analogy I always use is like when someone comes into a doctor's office, or if a guy runs into a doctor's office and says, Doc, I need a triple bypass, the doctor is not going to say, great, jump up on the table, I'll go get my scalpels. They're going to say, slow down, tell me where it hurts, how long has it been like this, so on and so forth. So no matter how excited the client is to have you do a specific thing, like, hey, I need you to add media queries to our CSS. Can you do that? Like, yeah, I can do that, but let's step back for a second. You might not need that. And it could be expensive. Whatever the thing is that they're asking, it could be expensive. There might be an easier way to solve this. So let's step back, tell me where it hurts, how long has this been happening? And that's what goes into the why conversation, which is the slide we have here. So the why conversation is a framework for talking buyers out of working with you. And if you can't do it, then it will have convinced you and them that they need to hire you. So it's a great thing to do in a sales interview. It feels counterintuitive because, it's a business. Shouldn't you want the work? And it's like, yes, you should want work, but you don't want every single opportunity comes through the door. You want to cherry pick the awesome ones. So what does this look like? There's these three questions, the three types of questions that you ask. Why this? Why would you do this project? Why not do this project? Why do this now? Is this urgent? Could you wait 6 months? You mentioned that you told me in the email that this has been going on for 6 months. What changed that is causing you to want to do this now? Has a big competitor moved into your space? Is Amazon after you? Did you just get a huge, Series B funding? Why is this important right now? And then the last one is, why would you hire someone expensive like me? I'm an outside consultant. Why would you do that? Why not do this internally? Don't you have internal web developers? Don't you have internal copywriters? Couldn't you go to Fiverr or 99 Designs? And you suggest all of the cheaper options. And so the overall effect that this has is that you actually care about delivering some kind of customer satisfaction by contributing to a positive business outcome. If they just want someone cheap, they're going to hire someone cheap. So don't bother fighting for that work. Those are not great clients. You want the clients who have already tried 99 designs. You want the clients who have already tried to outsource to, cheap development teams. You want those people who already know that those things aren't going to work. And they want an expert like you, and they're ready and they're prepared to pay more for it than the cheapest option. So you can imagine, if you're not attracting the right kind of clients, you will talk them out of working with you. And then, like in the Q&A a minute ago, you've got a positioning problem. You need to figure out how you're going to keep the lights on while you improve your marketing, improve your positioning, so that you're attracting better clients and more of them. So when they come to you, they're already half sold. They already want to work with you. They're not looking at anyone else. You're the obvious choice. And they just want to find out, can we get on your calendar? How much is going to be? We know it's going to be a lot, but exactly how much? So that's the idea there. Once you've gone through the why conversation and you've got answers that you are satisfied with to all of those 3 types of questions, why this, why now, why me? And you've got good answers, and you're like, you know what? I can help these people. I understand the current situation, I understand where they're going. I believe that where they want to go, I believe that I can contribute to moving this needle, whatever the needle is, but you got to find out what the needle is. So as you're wrapping up, I would usually say something like, all right, great. I can put together a proposal for you on this. I believe that we will be a good fit. I've got a couple of different ideas. I'm going to give you 3 options. Before I do that, what would it look like if this was a huge home run? How would we know that this was a big success? Or who is the stakeholder who's going to evaluate whether or not this was a good investment? Whatever the situation is, you want to find out what's going to satisfy them, because ultimately that's your goal, 100% customer satisfaction. You want to do this project with them, and at the end, you want them to be super happy that they paid you all that money. So finding out upfront before you even write the proposal is extremely helpful, because then you've got a goal in mind and you know how to kind of drive toward that goal, instead of just what most people do is just take this list of tasks that they've given you and apply your best practices from your industry. And that's how you end up fighting about design decisions when you're the designer and they're not, or code decisions or platform choices when you're the expert and they're not. It's because you're talking about the tasks instead of talking about the desired outcome, what's going to satisfy them. If what's going to satisfy them is, let's say, increased conversion rate on their opt-in page, and they start giving you input on the messaging or the font or something, the typeface on the web page, you can be like, don't worry, I'll take care of that. We're going to hit the goal here, and I'm going to use my expertise in those areas, which is why you hired me. And if there's some egregious failure, then you can let me know about that. But you don't have to waste your time worrying about the part that's my job. Just trust. The trust is a non-trivial issue. If they don't trust you, you shouldn't be working with them in the first place. So let's just assume for now that they do trust that you're good at what you do. They've paid you the money, and you're going to hit this goal for them. That gives you control over the scope and micromanaging and all of that stuff. So knowing what a home run looks like before you even write the proposal is huge, and it's there. If you're talking to the right person, they're going to know what a home run looks like, because they know that things are broken. The whole reason they know that something's wrong is something that they're measuring, even if it's intangible or whatever. They know something's wrong because they're having some symptom, and probably the success metric is that symptom is gone. And you're going to say, well, how are you going to know that symptom is gone? And they'll say something like, well, if our conversion rates went up, or if our star rating in iTunes went up, then we would, up by how much? 2 stars. Yeah, I can do that. Okay, if they can't answer that question, a flip side could be, what would be a disaster? What would be the worst possible thing that could happen in this project? And that might help you understand or get to what a home run might be. And if you are talking to the wrong person, or the person who you're talking to is the person who decides, but not the person who approves the budget or is going to give the stamp of approval on the final project, you want to find out for sure. Hopefully you can talk to them about what they are going to use to judge the success or failure of the project. Personally, if I found out at this point in the meeting that the primary stakeholder wasn't there, I'd probably schedule another meeting. It would depend. I would really have to trust my project contact if I was going to move forward without talking to the primary stakeholder. I'd really want to talk to the primary stakeholder. Okay. So that was a huge amount of stuff. We're going to jump back to questions. I imagine that there are some over there. Stop sharing. Questions. Let's see if there's anything in particular. Higher value options. These are just looking to see if there are any specifically about this particular subject. But okay, here's one. If someone does not want to reveal a budget during the sales interview, is it better to name a number right away or ask for some time to get back to them? And then Mark says, in my experience, you want to steer clear of budget and get more to economic impact. The only time I like to talk budget is if I think the prospect is a tire kicker. Yeah, that's actually a really good answer. So a lot of people you'll see on websites where there's a contact form and it's like, select your budget. I don't really care what the budget is. It is a good indication of a tire kicker, but the budget is not really that relevant. It could be wrong, so it can help. It kind of depends. I really don't care about the budget. What I care about is having them explain to me, why do the project at all? Because their budget could be totally wrong. It could be too high. It could be too low. It's the budget that they have allocated is for almost certainly for some preconceived notion, some self-diagnosis, which could be wrong. So the budget kind of doesn't matter. If it turns out that their self-diagnosis is correct in your expert opinion, then okay, maybe the budget matters. But if they don't want to reveal it, I don't really care about that. In fact, whenever I would get to a point in a meeting where I couldn't see any good fit, like I really clicked with the buyer and it seemed like they wanted to hire me, but I just couldn't figure out why, I would, like a tangible reason, like what are they going to measure to declare victory on a project like this? Sometimes I'll get to the end and be like, I feel like we're clicking here, but I honestly don't see a business case for you guys to spend $1 million with me. Like, I don't see what you're going to get out of it. Like, I'd love to work together. You seem great. And it seems like a fun project, but I don't see what's in it for you. And I don't want to take your money now and then find out in 6 months that you're like, this was actually a bad idea. Because you might not blame me, but I don't want that. I don't want that situation. So sometimes that can trigger something that is so obvious to them that they failed to mention it. So sometimes they'll like blurt out, well, Amazon's like taking all our customers. Like, oh, okay. Like somehow, because it's so obvious to them, sometimes they'll forget to mention it to an outsider. It's not obvious, but to people inside the business, it's totally obvious. So sometimes that can shake loose some kind of success metric. But yeah, like Mark said, I don't really care about the budget in the sales interview. If I was going to approach it like that, if I cared about budget, I'd do it the way a kind of wedding dress model is, where the first thing they ask you when you walk in is like, "What's your budget?" It's like, let's save everybody some time. Just tell me how much your budget is for the wedding dress, and I can take you to the part of the store that makes the most sense for you. But in a B2B situation, I don't really see that. It's a budget indicates a self-diagnosis, and it's really common that they misdiagnose themselves. They want a triple bypass, but they don't need one. Or they think they need an antacid, but they need a triple bypass. So I don't really care about that. All I'm figuring when I talk to them is like, what's in it for you guys for an engagement like this? Try and figure that out. And I wouldn't worry about the budget. It can be useful sometimes, but not that big a deal. Here's a good one. How do you value price your work if you are just one service provider in a pool of many? How do I specify my individual contribution to the overall value to the client? Okay, first question, how do you value price your work if you're just one service provider in a pool of many? That's a positioning problem. If you just look like another apple in the pile, you're always going to be competing on price. You need to stand out in a meaningful way to your ideal buyers. Usually this means focusing down on a very specific kind of buyer, whether it's a vertical market or some kind of psychographic definition, however you segment your audience and speak directly to them. And then you will stand out from generalists who want to be everything to everyone, and you need to seem meaningfully different somehow. It's a positioning exercise. The second question here, how do I specify my individual contribution to the overall value to the client? They'll tell you. When you're asking them these questions, you'd say, why would you hire someone expensive like me? And they'll say, well, because X, Y, and Z. We've tried this before and it blew up in our face. Or, we built a software product previously without any kind of system architecture and it blew up in our face. It's usually going to be they learned the lesson the hard way in the past and they don't want to make the same mistake again. They've got a huge project. They got a big project. It's risky. Heads could roll if it didn't go well. So they want to mitigate the risk by hiring an outside expert. So you got to stand out from the pool of many, and you need to, and then have them explain to you why you're the obvious choice. That's what the why conversation does. Another thing to point out here is that you don't need to know exactly how much value they think you're going to contribute. It's not an exact science. But if you, through the why conversation, if you determine that the overall project would be worth like $100,000 to them on an annual basis, like they won't have to hire 2 new admins because you built some internal process that's going to automate their invoicing, let's just say. And you say to them, why hire me to do this when you could just hire 2 admins to type invoices faster? Like, why not just do that? Wouldn't that be more predictable? And they'll tell you why they can't. So you'd be like, all right, so I know that the value here is at least the fully loaded cost of 2 salaries in wherever this company is. So let's just say that's 100,000. Then in your options, you can have 3 prices: 10% of the possible value, 22% of the possible value, and 50% of the possible value. And then you say, we're going to talk about this in pricing, and then you create the scope after you've come up with the prices. So that's a whole can of worms. We're going to talk about that next. But yeah, it's like 10%. If you're even remotely in the ballpark on the overall value to the client, where I just said 100,000, then giving them an option that's 10%. Like if they don't think you're going to contribute at least 10% to this overall outcome, they wouldn't even be talking to you. So just start at 10% for option 1, and then 22% and 50% is like one pricing curve I use a lot. And then they can decide how high up your pricing tier they want to go. All right, let's grab this one. How do you handle offering 3 options in the proposal if during the sales call you find out in the conversation that 1 or 2 of the options is not what they want? How do you handle offering 3 options in the proposal if during the sales? In your example, what if the prospect told you that they don't want to do all the writing white paper in-house? Do you still include messaging only? Oh, okay, no. So as you're going through the sales interview, you're probably going to be having ideas about things that you could potentially do for this client, but try not to think about it. And we'll talk about this more, but try not to think about what you're going to do. Even if they're saying, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. You're like, great, I wrote all that down. Now let's back up and tell me what your current situation is, why you're doing this at all, all the why questions. And then you've got all these notes about their motivations and how much they care, how urgent it is, how risky it is, who the primary stakeholders are. Hopefully they're sitting there, what they think your contribution is, all of that stuff. And then you say, at the end of the call, I'd set expectations like, okay, I'm going to give you 3 options. They're going to be, small, medium, and large. And you can just pick the one that you think is the best fit for you, whether it's timeline or budget or what have you. And they'll say, okay, great. Be like, okay, I'll have that to you on Wednesday. Is that acceptable? They'll say, sure. So naturally, if anything was ruled out in the phone call, I wouldn't include that in the options. But I would start to, maybe I would set some expectations like, well, I think option 1 might be something like, an advisory DIY thing, or you could make some recommendations. Like if they're a bad fit for a custom project, maybe you could say, oh, all you really need to do is take my course or something. Or before you even work with me, you should really go through and talk to somebody else, like the Domino's story where they hired an ad agency to do a campaign, and the ad agency is like, we can't do this. Your pizza's terrible. We tried everything. The pizza's just not good. So they might need product help before you can even help them with their marketing, for example. But assuming that you get it to the end of the call, the interview, and you're like, yeah, I can see a few ways that I can engage with these people, or I can see that they need help with something that my expertise can solve. then you can think about how you're going to package it when you sit down to write the proposal. And again, we'll talk about that in a second on pricing. Here's a quick one. Any tips for proposals to poor nonprofits? Okay, first of all, nonprofits, well, I can see the answer already. Nonprofits are not always poor. Go to guidestar.com or .org, and they're billion-dollar nonprofits. Second, I would just say to them, look, I took, if they come back to you and say like, oh, well, we're a nonprofit, can you give us a better price? I'd say I took that into consideration when I came up with the prices. I always take that sort of thing into consideration, and it's already included in the price. If the company is poor, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, that's a different issue. But if somebody's just trying to guilt you into not making money because of the business model they chose, you can make a joke and say, yeah, I have a special pricing for nonprofits. Since you don't have to pay taxes, I charge 20% more. I don't, if somebody broke, that's one thing. If they're not broke, if just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean they're broke. So I guess that's that one point. And the other thing is, if the value is there, if you uncover some kind of value of the desired outcome, the money will be there, assuming they're not, if they're keeping the lights on and they have payroll, the money's there. It's just a question of prioritizing it for this project. And if they see the value, they will do it. If they don't see the value, they will not do it. So if they're the disconnect, well, I'm going to pause there because I'm going to talk about a disconnect there with the pricing stuff. All right, so let's jump back to slides. And again, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I'm going to come back in after all the slides are over, and I'm going to get through as many of these as I can before the time runs out. If you need to jump off, then you can come back and watch the recording after. All right, share screen. Okay. So setting prices. So it's good because these are great questions and they're actually moving right and segueing nicely into each of the next sections. So that's fabulous. All right. So this is a mind blower. All right. So when it comes to setting prices, I want you to consider scoping last. This is really weird. Normally you scope first. In the sales interview, what you want to do normally is, especially if you bill by the hour, but in general, it's true. You oftentimes are just super focused on your cost, and then you're planning on setting a price based on your cost. What's your cost? The cost is your time. So if you're in this interview with people, then you probably, if you're new to this, you're not good at value pricing, you're going to spend a ton of time talking about what they want you to do and thinking about how much work it's going to be. So if you're a software developer, you might be thinking about how many tables in the database, or how many lines of code, or how many sprints, or how many features. If you're a copywriter, you might be thinking about how many words, how many pages, how many white papers, how many scripts. If you're a designer, you might be thinking about how many revisions, or who knows. There are all of these things. You don't have to think about any of that stuff in the sales interview. You don't need to know that. You just need to know what their, what their current state is, where does it hurt, what they would like their desired future state to be, and what they think your contribution is going to be, and find out what that home run is. So, okay, all that stuff there, then you say, all right, this is probably worth, for a company like this, it's probably worth $100,000 per year for this solution, because they won't have to hire another person because of this thing, let's just say. Or maybe you're doing something that's tied to sales or traffic, or something that they use as a metric upstream that will probably translate into sales. So maybe you do something like I'll use the white paper example again. So you write white papers, but they don't want a white paper. What they want is a lead magnet, so they can capture emails, so they can nurture the leads, so that they can do a demo. So you want to talk to them in the sales meeting about what they're trying to do and which piece they think is in your wheelhouse. So if you're a copywriter and you make lead magnets or white papers or something for highly technical enterprise B2B software, then okay, dear client, why would you pay me to write a white paper? And they're like, well, we're not getting enough demos. And be like, well, or we're not selling enough, or we're not selling enough stuff. And it's like, well, I can't control your sales. That could be a product problem, could be a salesperson problem, it could be a demo problem. There's all sorts of problems there. But I do feel confident guaranteeing an increase in the number of opt-ins for the lead magnet. Is that, what's your current opt-in rate? And they'll say, they'll say 3%. You'd be like, I can definitely, having had this conversation, I'm confident saying that I can at least double that. If I doubled your opt-in rate, do you think that would have downstream effects that would be valuable? And they would be like, oh yeah, we know that if we get more opt-ins that we can convert all that traffic downstream. Our funnel down there is fabulous. We're just not getting the opt-ins up here at the top of the funnel. So even though you can't control the final outcome, the $100,000 outcome, let's say, you can control your one piece up at the top. And they told you that they believe that those two things are causally connected. So you're in the conversation. You have all that information. You go to sit down at the proposal and you say, okay, this is probably around $100,000 value. So I'm going to just come up with three prices. I'm not even going to think about what I'm going to do. I'm just going to say 10,000, 22,000, 50,000. Now you say to yourself, what could I do for $10,000 that would be a great profit for me, wouldn't take me a ton of time, but would still be very valuable to the client? It would help them move this needle. And the needle that they're looking to move is some kind of increased downloads, increased number of opt-ins to their lead magnet, just to keep using that example. And then you go, all right, 22,000. What can I add on top of option one that would be even more valuable? And maybe you take more ownership over something farther down the funnel. So you take more ownership, or you kind of work with them more closely. You give it more attention. It's going to take more of your time, but it's also going to be more likely to succeed. In other words, you come up with an approach that will probably move the needle more than option one would. And same thing with three. If I had $50,000, what could I do to really hit a home run for these people? And that might involve hiring, some temporary contractors to do some design work or something, or pulling in an extra body to do some very custom landing page, or who knows, or Facebook ad expert. There's all sorts of different things you could do if you think about scope last. This is backwards from what people are used to doing. They're used to thinking about, what activities do you want me to do? How long do I think that's going to take? And multiply that by my hourly rate, and there's your estimate or fixed price based on cost. This is the opposite. Find the value, come up with three prices, and then within those prices, come up with some kind of scope that makes sense for you and is going to be valuable to them. Totally backwards, really hard to get your mind around this, but that is the way it works. It takes practice, but you can get there. The pricing curves that are listed here, I just told you the Goldilocks pricing curve. 10,000, 22,000, 50,000, or 1, 2.2, 5. So whatever that curve kind of like increases as it goes from option one to option three. And what that curve does is it drives people to option two, which is the natural result of having three options anyway. So you'd be pushing really hard psychologically for the person to pick option two out of those three things. Oh, I jumped ahead. Okay, so this slide, so I kind of already talked through these next three slides. So the scoping last I just described. Start with the value, pick some prices, and then define your scope inside of those prices. The pricing curves I started to talk about. Goldilocks is that 1, 2.25x version that drives people to option two. Might as well pricing is something you would use when you were really wanted to get the client and you wanted to leave. You didn't want to leave a lot of money on the table. And that one, I would do, option one would be 10,000, option two would be 15,000, option three would be 17,500. So it gets, the increases become smaller as it goes up. And the psychology there is like, well, if we're going to buy option one, we might as well get option two. And then, well, let's look at option three. Yeah, we might as well get option three anyway, also. So that drives them to option three. It's not my favorite, but if you really need the work, or you really want the client because it'd be a great logo on your website, or you're just nervous about, putting that huge 5x number on there, Then you can go with might as well pricing and hopefully get option 3. And then the last one is, I just put custom because pricing is crazy and you can do any kind of variation that you think makes sense. Once you get good at this, you could have, I mean, the prices are always going to go up when you have 3 incremental options, but they could get really drastically up. Like I've had ranges from like 10,000 on the low end to like, 100 or 250,000 on the high end, where the low end is just like an innovation workshop or a strategy meeting. And then the high end is like a full soup to nuts, like project build out. It's a little bit unusual, but I wanted to add in custom here or ad hoc because pricing's wild. And if you get better and better at this, then you might be able to, you can do whatever you want, but as a rule of thumb, you're probably going to want to start with might as well or Goldilocks. Okay. And now justifying your prices. Now, this is something that started to crop up in the questions, like the nonprofit question. Pushback you'll get sometimes on prices that are fixed and are premium. A common thing that you'll hear is, well, how'd you calculate this? Because they want to kind of reverse engineer some kind of hourly or daily or weekly rate from what it is that you're proposing. And you say, I calculated it based on experience with past jobs like this and clients like this. This seems like, I think this is a safe number for me to commit to, because you're the one taking all the risk. If you're wrong and it takes longer, that's on you. Same thing here. How many hours do you think this will take? You say, I don't know. That's why I don't work by the hour, because that wouldn't be fair to you. I want to give you a fixed price so that you know upfront how much of an investment is required. Anything else would be, I wouldn't feel comfortable with, because if I don't know how much it's going to cost, I don't know if I can satisfy you. I don't know if it's going to come in under budget. So I don't want to go over budget. So that's why I give fixed prices, because I don't know how many hours it's going to take. And then another common one is, you're twice as expensive as anyone else. Why should we go with you? And what I would say to that is, there's a couple of things you can say. If you are giving fixed prices, then you could say, well, I talked to those other people and see if they'll stand behind those prices. Like, are they estimates, or are they going to stand behind those no matter what? Because if they're just estimates, then you don't really have a price from them. You have a price from me. Another thing you could say is, well, if you go to those people and they'll stand behind their prices and commit to that, not to exceed that number that they gave you, and you think that they and I are roughly comparable, then you should go with the cheaper one. If you think we're the same and they're going to give you a lower fixed price, then yeah, go with them. So again, this gets to a positioning thing. If they're considering someone else at all, you might have a bit of a positioning issue where they don't meaningfully see the difference between you and some competitors. As your positioning and your marketing gets stronger and stronger, this completely goes away, or almost completely goes away, because they're not even looking at other people. They just want to work with you because you are the go-to person worldwide. And when I say worldwide, I mean in their world, that you're the go-to person for this thing. They're not even talking to anybody else. Okay. So again, flew through tons of stuff. I'm sure there are a lot of questions here because this is a real mind shift. So let me stop sharing the slides. And since we're over time, let's see how many people, still have quite a few people here. So let me just say one thing about the pricing seminar, which is that if you've found this useful at all so far, and for sticking around so long, I've got a coupon code for you. If you want to register for the pricing seminar, you can click on the Enroll Now button, and the coupon code is Bluebird. So that's for people that came to this webinar, and it'll last as long as this video is up. It'll probably be about 24 hours, 48 hours. So if you found this valuable and you'd like to find out about the 11 other weeks of content, then you can go check that out. All right, enough of that. Back to questions. Okay, so I'm going to try and tackle pricing ones first, and then I'm just going to go back to the top and go through. Okay, here's a good one. The question is, how do you handle risk factors / assumptions? All right, so in the proposal, you're going to have a list of things that could blow up in your face. These are risks and assumptions. You want to dispel as many of these as possible. So because assumptions are just regret. It's just potential, just problems. You want to dispel as many of these as possible. I'd put them in the proposal and then probably close the deal. And then in initial kickoff meeting, at that point, I might double check the risks and assumptions. And if it turns out that something's way disconnected, I might say, well, let's pump the brakes. My assumption was that you read the proposal, you didn't raise a red flag, but now that I'm talking to you, you're saying that, oh, actually, yeah, that is going to be a problem. I would potentially go so far as to be like, hold on, maybe we need to requote this. I'm going to give you your money back. This is invalidated for some reason. Because with a fixed price, assuming you're doing a fixed price, all the risk is on you to get this thing done. So if there's something on there, like a classic one for a developer is they'll say something like, oh, well, the entire interface needs to be localized in like 14 languages. Obviously, you'd be like, nobody said that. And it said right here that it wasn't going to be localized in multiple languages. And now you're telling me that it does need to be. That's a big difference. So I would handle that potentially as extremely as refunding their money. Another thing that the idea is you want to call out all the risks and assumptions in the proposal and review them and then you get paid or whatever. And then you review them initially, you can double check them, make sure, okay, great, everything's cool. But still there's a list of things there. And even if the client doesn't sort of fail to read them and change their mind in the kickoff meeting. So you say, all right, these are risks and assumptions. Like, let's say there's a third-party API that isn't quite done yet, and you have to build a front end for it. Or, I don't know, a product isn't done yet, but they want you to start doing marketing materials for it, and they need you to do videos on stuff that isn't fully baked. Whatever the risks are, if you can't mitigate them and they're just there, you want to factor that into your pricing. So it's like, if this is going to be a big risk and it could blow up in your face, you're going to want to set your prices just almost assuming that the risk is going to happen. So, all right, you say to the client, they said something like, wow, these prices seem kind of high, like higher than we expected. And you're like, well, there are a lot of risks here and we're taking on all of those risks. So if any of these things happen, it won't be bad for you, it'll be bad for us. So if you want to take the risk for these risks, that section, the risks and assumptions, then you need to price yourself so that you won't get killed by it. And if you call that out to the client and say, look, we're taking all these risks, you're not, they'd be like, they could say something like, well, you don't need to do that. We'll take care of those, or we'll worry about that. And you just say, okay, then we'll change the proposal. These are not our problems. That's your problem. We'll give you a different price. And if this blows up in your face, then so be it. That's your problem. I've never actually done that, but theoretically that's what you could do. So the point is that whoever is taking the risk, any given risk, is the one who should benefit from taking that risk, which means increasing your prices. And business people understand this. They sense it naturally. You, dear viewer, might not be comfortable or used to thinking about this, especially if you bill by the hour because you're not taking any risks. So business owners are confident, or leaders are really used to factoring risk into value. So if you're going to take risks for them, they're going to be willing to pay more for it. So, you just have to, it's kind of I can't say there's like a science, I can't give you a formula to figure it out. It's kind of gut instinct and experience. But the more experienced you are, the more likely you're going to know what the risk factors are, what the, client assumptions might be. You'll call them out, get some kind of alignment on them, and then you'll set your prices based on what you believe the likelihood and impact of any of these risks occurring is. All right. Here's a good one. Hey, Jay, most of the time clients want to know a ballpark price or how expensive a developer I am, just to know if they can afford my pricing. They want a number during the initial discussion and before the proposal. How do I handle this? Yeah, I just don't do this. So I just turn the conversation around to the project, to why they would do this in the first place. And just say, I don't know. They'll say, how expensive are you? A lot of times that's like, what's your hourly rate? And if you say a number that is higher than what they expected, they think you're expensive. But that's idiotic, of course, because it needs to be, they're missing the multiplier, which is the number of hours. So it doesn't make any sense to judge based on an hourly rate in a vacuum, but people do it. because they don't have an actual price. So they don't really have anything that the hourly rate is the only thing they understand that is meaningfully different between choice A and choice B. So it's like something they can get their head around. So they use that. So that is why when people say, what should I say when they ask for my hourly rate? I just say, I don't have one. I don't have one, 4 words. And then they'll say, well, how do you price your work? And you say, I'll give you a price for the work. Is that acceptable? And they'll be like, they sometimes will say, well, we need an hourly rate because it's a government thing. And, but other times they'll be like, yeah, that'd be great. I love that. That would be great. I would love to know in advance how much this is going to cost. So then you can get back to and then if they say, well, yeah, but what kind of ballpark are you in here? I would sometimes kid like an enormous range, be like, well, I don't know if we're building a doghouse here or a mansion. So, I don't know how much it's going to be between $500 and $5 million. Like, does that help? And they'll laugh and you'll be like, okay, if I could just ask you some questions about what you're trying to do here, I can come up with some prices for you. But until I understand what needs to be done, I can't give you a price. It's like, I don't know if I'm giving you a triple bypass or an antacid. So let's talk. And if you can't get them to talk, then they're probably not going to be a good client. So just let them go. All right. All right, here's a good question. 3 options. Number 1, basics of what they asked for. Number 2 and number 3, what should we focus on when providing those higher value options? Okay, this is going to be different by industry and also by project. So there's a lot of ways to answer this. Think about it like this. The thing that you're quoting is the needle that they want moved. Figure out what change they want to make. And your option 1 is going to contribute the least to that change. Your option 2 is probably going to contribute the medium amount to that change. And then option 3 is going to contribute the most to that change. It could be very different things that happen at each level. Option 1, one way to look at it, and this is from Blair Enns, and I love it. One approach to this sometimes is where option 1 is a DIY solution where they do all the work, but you give them the knowledge. You give them either a plan or training or a workshop or something at the beginning where you're giving them a blueprint, for example, and they're going to go build the house. They're going to find contractors. They're going to build it. They're going to keep it up. They're going to maintain it, all that. You just give them the blueprint. Option 2 might be, the done with you option where you give them the plan in option 1, and option 2, you work with them to actually build the house. So you wrote the blueprint and then you work with them to build the house. So maybe that includes maybe it's you're managing or overseeing their internal team, whether it's developers or copywriters or photographers or whatever, and you give them this blueprint that you created and you follow along to make sure that they are building the thing the way that conforms with the blueprint. If they have any questions that were previously not considered, you can answer them on the fly. You can really help the team with some sort of oversight. And then maybe the top option is they don't use the internal team. You staff it up, you do it, or maybe they don't have an internal team. And option 3 is that you create a team for them. Or maybe option 3 is, the most ownership over this whole thing would be something like, you created the blueprint, you train their team, you manage their team, you support the outcome. You give 3 months of training after the fact, or if it's a software project, a year of bug-free guarantee, bug fixes for a year or something like that. So it really depends a lot on your industry. But if you think of it, one way to think about it is DIY, option 1, done with you, option 2, and done for you, option 3. So that's like one model that seems to apply to a lot of different industries. Notice that the tasks inside of each one are very different. The tasks change. Options 2 and 3 are not more of option 1's tasks or deliverables. It's like a different kind of engagement as you go up the chain. All right. Here's a good one. Sometimes it's not helpful to provide incremental options because the scope is limited, but instead provide 3 completely different options that don't build on each other. In those cases, would you say the client is not a good fit? So you're starting with scope. you're assuming that the client knows what they want done, or that you in 1 hour can work with them and decide exactly what the scope is of what needs to be done. Maybe for a really small engagement, a week or something, or 2 weeks, this is possible. But for a project, which is what we're talking about here, project proposals, a project that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, it's a collaborative enterprise between the two businesses, between yours and theirs, you're not going to get the scope right in that meeting. There's no way. So it's just not going to happen. So if start with scope, you're going to be setting your prices based on that, and you're going to be too low, almost certainly, unless you like double your estimate or something like that. So what I would say is think less about what the scope is. Don't talk about the scope in the meeting. Talk about what change they want, what transformation they're trying to get, and what they see as your contribution to that. And then you give them 3 different ways you could contribute to that transformation, and the scope of each of those will be different. So, and yes, if they're like, no, we only want you to come in and we want you to write CSS for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, yeah, that's not a good client. That's staff augmentation. They just want to tell you what to do. They are the experts. They just need another pair of hands. So I would stay away from that kind of work in general. It doesn't grow your business. It might keep the lights on. So if you need to keep the lights on, do that 20 hours a week. But the other 20 hours of the week, be looking for these clients that are looking for a transformation that they believe you can contribute to, and give them value prices based on your contribution to the value, and not on the scope. There should be they're going to talk about scope in the meeting, but just minimize that. Say, oh, okay, great, I wrote that down, but let's get back to why you're doing this and what the transformation is. Yeah. Okay. So one last thing. Yeah, he says it was a very small project. For really small projects, you could maybe create a productized service. So when somebody comes along and they've got this specific kind of issue that you like doing, and you're great at it and you're super fast at it, maybe it's like a website in a day type of product where we'll build you a 1-page website in 1 day, and here's how that works, and it's $3,000. Yeah, you can take on that, and then it only takes a day or only takes a week, something like that. So you can create productized services for these small fish type things, and you can have a really booming business based on those small things, and never even do giant custom projects, or only do them occasionally when someone comes to you and they're a perfect fit, and you don't have a productized service to sell to them. So we talk about productized services in the pricing seminar, but that's not sort of outside of the scope of this. But if you do have small stuff like that you like doing, and you're super fast at it and you do a great job, you could turn it into a productized service and offer that to people who come through the door looking for those sorts of things. Interesting. Okay. Do you need a sales interview if a lot of that info already came through in emails from the potential client? Would a strategy session be an appropriate next step? I have never. I think the likelihood of the correct information coming through an email is so far-fetched. I've never heard of that happening. I mean, it's very much a real-time thing, ideally in person, because even in body language matters. It's very helpful. Body language is very helpful. So it's really hard for me to imagine a scenario where you actually got the answers to these questions in email. Maybe if you've got a really strong, trusting relationship with the person, and you've known them for a long time, and the communication is excellent, maybe, but I've just never seen it happen. I would say something like, oh, thanks for all the information in the email. Let's jump on a phone. I've got some questions I want to ask about the context of the project and that sort of thing, just to make sure we're a good fit before I put together a proposal. I would never put together a proposal without talking to someone first, unless it was a small productized service type of thing, in which case there's no proposal, but we can work that out over email. Is this a good fit for me? Yeah, I think it is. And then you do the productized service, they pay for it, you do it. And it's a small thing, so it's not that big a deal. But a project, which is what we're talking about here, it's too risky. I would never give a fixed price for a project without talking to someone. I want to know I like them, first of all. But this is just too risky for me. Let's see. Top problem, weighing how much professional ease, I like that, to use in a proposal versus plain language. My target market are enterprise software teams. All right. This is a really good question. So the first thing I would say is never sacrifice clarity. That's number one. If there's some buzzword that they're using, define it. So you may be in risk and assumptions, but you don't sacrifice clarity for trying to be professional. The second thing is, yes, you should use the language of your buyer. So if your buyer has a very formal language and they're a good fit for you, then you probably use formal language already. If you're attracting the kinds of buyers that you want to have dinner with, then you probably already talk like they do. So your plain language is probably appropriate. Just be careful about sacrificing clarity, because professionalese or business speak is like famously opaque. Or there'll be words that are buzzwords that are ill-defined, or the customer maybe doesn't understand that great. Just make sure, how do you make sure? Like, just do your best to make sure it's clear. But yeah, you don't want to be using like slang or swearing or something in a proposal. Not that you would do that, but you don't want to be unprofessional. But speak the language of your buyer, person that's going to read this, or people that they'll pass it around to. But don't sacrifice clarity for buzzwords or whatever else. Make sure you're very clear about anything that could be misconstrued, because that's kind of like a hidden assumption in a way, where this is a misunderstanding. We thought you were going to build us an HTML5 app, or whatever the misunderstanding might be. Giacomo's got a nice point here too. Like, you can clarify some of that stuff in the sales interview. So if they use a term, one of the things that happens in a sales interview a lot is that a buyer might use some kind of jargon or refer to something that you didn't understand. Maybe they have an accent that you don't understand, but there's some acronym or term or something. You're like, wait a minute, what was that? I would like pull the ripcord and be like, whoa, what was that? What'd you just say? And they'll say like, oh, they'll clarify. And you'll be like, oh, sorry, I misunderstood you. Oh, chaos monkey, I thought you said something else. But if it's some internal term that they use to communicate with each other, and of course you wouldn't know it, but they forgot to sort of let you in on the joke, so to speak. So, stopping them and making sure we're clear. Clarity is critical in any kind of project, the proposal, the sales interview. At any point, clarity is super, super important. Is potentially another reason why I wouldn't start I wouldn't write a project proposal for anything non-trivial size without actually talking to the people. But yeah, in the conversation, that'd be a great place to get clarity on particular terms. All right. Here's an interesting one. Is it possible or even suggested to try and convince potential clients to jump ship to you when it's clear your field is an afterthought to them? In other words, would you recommend spending time and energy with people and convince them you're the better option, or rather build relationships with clients seeking your advice in your field? Yeah, I mean, you lost me at the word convince. I'm never trying to convince anybody. So what's the specific though? So, I mean, the answer is no. Would you recommend spending time and energy with people to convince them that you're the better option? No, I really wouldn't. It's like in the scenario before, where you get a price objection where they say, well, this other company is like half your price. What that says is they don't see a meaningful difference between you and the other company. And so if you can surface some kind of meaningful difference, like, well, that's an estimate and mine's a quote, mine's a fixed price, and there's an hour's estimate, that might be meaningful to the client. So, I make sure they know about that. But you've already lost if they gave a fixed price also and it's half of yours, and they believe that the quality and everything else is going to be roughly the same, you already lost. Like, it's not going to, there's nothing you can say to them is going to convince them at that point. That's a marketing failure or positioning failure on your part for looking too similar to the alternatives, especially when they're a lot cheaper. So yeah, I mean, at the point when you're in a sales interview or at the point where you're writing a proposal, it's way too late to fix that stuff. So how do you fix that? On a regular basis, you differentiate yourself from the other options in the marketplace. And the easiest way to do that is get really specific about who you want to work with and speak directly to them, because very few people probably are speaking directly to them. And if you have to get ridiculously focused, that's fine. You can probably only take 10 new clients a year. Most people could probably only handle 10 clients a year. So you only need like a market of 100 businesses potentially, and you could be slammed if you dominate that market. So it can be a really, really focused market. Yeah, as soon as you feel like you need to convince someone of something, you already lost. It's too late. Just move on. Let's see. What do you think about the idea of locking one or some of the three options so they can see it to compare, but is not allowed to choose all of them, ghosting out some of the options? Mm, I don't. I don't know if I understand this. I mean, in the model that I don't know if you mean this just from a visual standpoint, but option three is everything. Like if you're following this approach, then option three is everything. So, but maybe you just mean it like, I don't understand exactly. Maybe I don't understand the question. What do you think about the idea of locking one or some of the three options? I don't know why you would do that. So if Dennis is still here. Yeah, are we talking about a project proposal? If we're talking about a project proposal, I wouldn't worry about the visuals. Yeah, I mean, my proposals are, if you go to jonathanstark.com/5, the number 5, you can download one of these proposal examples, and it's just like plain text Word document type of thing, nothing fancy. Do you want them to choose one of the others? Yeah, I'm not following. Yeah, I wouldn't. I guess I would say no. I wouldn't do that. Okay, here's one. I presented 3 proposals to the client after an extensive sales interview. However, when the client replied, he felt I hadn't paid attention to him because the number 2 proposal was his demand. 1 was more of a DIY, and 3 was something very robust they didn't have the money to do. And he said that at the interview. Should I have only sent one option, or how better to pose the other 2? Yeah, so I think this can happen sometimes when a client is really dominating the meeting and they want you to do a specific set of tasks, and in your case they see that as what the proposal they want. So I don't know if this is true in your case, but probably they're viewing you as someone who they want to do this list of tasks. So why are you even suggesting that I would do it myself? So what that tells me is, in the sales interview, you weren't able to navigate them away from the self-diagnosis of what they want done and get them into what the success metric was. What is the desired outcome? How are we going to know when this transformation has taken place? And then you could say, well, I mean, if you were in that situation and the person was really focused on like, no, we need you to do this list of tasks, you'd be like, okay, I'll put that in there, but there are cheaper ways to handle this. Would you like me to put those in the proposal or not? I think that probably this is really just practice in the sales interview, getting a little bit more knowledgeable about shifting the conversation away from what you're going to do to what transformation they want. So it's less about like, hey, we want you to knock out all of the backlog in our Jira, something like that. It's like, okay, why? So if they're viewing you as like staff augmentation or a contractor or just like a pair of hands to do some labor for them, that's a marketing fail. You need to switch it around to be like, I'm the go-to person for these sorts of outcomes for these sorts of buyers. It might do it all different ways. Depends. There's a million ways to skin the cat. I'm not going to get locked in by a non-expert telling me what to do, how to do my job, or to move this needle or whatever. So if you want an expert, then we can talk. But if they just want labor and they just want you to do stuff for them, then it could be that was what was going through their mind in this situation, where the DIY was just like, no, I want you to do this list of tasks. I mean, maybe that's not exactly what happened, but I do understand what you're saying. And I've seen it occasionally where the option 1 that someone presented was not what they were expecting to get. So why even waste their time with something that they weren't expecting? So your option 1, and you want the conversation, leave the conversation in a way that's going to set their expectation that the needle that you guys want moved, I can engage 3 different ways, small, medium, and large, and you can just pick the option that suits your budget. But if you talked a lot in the meeting about scope and stuff you're going to do, then they're going to be expecting a quote on the stuff you talked about. So hopefully that helps. Um, okay, here's a good question. So Chris Doe from the future has said you should ask for the budget up front so you don't waste time writing a proposal for a client that doesn't have the money. Do you agree with this approach? I mean, I understand why he says this, and I just don't do it. Like, it could work, but I just don't do it. I don't want to. But his problem that he's solving by asking for budget is an important one. How do you qualify clients who have no budget? And my answer to that is be obviously expensive. Everything about your marketing and everything should just look expensive. So just be expensive. Always be talking about how expensive you are and that you're the premium option, worldwide expert, #1 best-selling book, like keynote speaker, like all these things that make you different in ways that might be meaningful to ideal buyers. They should know already that you're expensive. So people who don't have budget aren't going to be coming to you. Yes, if you're just starting out and if you don't have any kind of leverage and you're getting a lot of really cheapskate clients coming to you, maybe asking for budget up front will filter out ones that are small potatoes, I guess. But if that's your problem, I don't think asking for budget is going to help you, because you can ask for the budget to maybe not talk to people who don't have at least $5,000 for a logo or something. But it makes me feel like you're probably pretty undifferentiated and don't appear expensive in the first place. And I'm going to pull in productized services again. If you want to do you could put together a productized service package for people that don't have a lot of budget, but is in your area of expertise and would stand to benefit from someone to invest, $5,000 in some like prepackaged brand guidelines thing, or who knows what. So I get his point. I agree with Chris on many things. I don't see how asking for the budget upfront really helps you. I think the core problem is that you're not differentiated enough and you're not standing out from the crowd enough to appear like a premium option. So what I'd rather see is that over time build up this sort of a marketing, branding and messaging positioning that makes it obvious that you're expensive. So when they come to you, the only people coming to you are going to be like, yeah, we know it's going to be a lot. Like, that's why we came to you. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to take time to do. And I guess if you're getting tons of requests for work and everybody's a cheapskate and doesn't have any money, I just keep coming back to the same thing. That's a marketing problem. You're attracting the wrong kinds of clients. You need to attract better clients. So, yeah, I'm not going to say I disagree with them per se, but I just think it's a little bit of a Band-Aid. And I think it would be, I think the real solution is to, it feels like a cough drop, and what you really need to do is quit smoking. All right. How will you become the obvious choice for work if you're a native mobile app developer and there are already hundreds of large, well-established companies doing the same and positioned extremely well? And there's some comments here. Sounds like you need more specific positioning statement. Yep. Try to get them from I'm a native mobile app developer to I help venture-backed healthcare startups build native apps. Yep, that's one way to do it. Another thing to do is to think about, like, right now, if you are a coder, you code mobile apps. That's how you make your money. Step back from that and think like an expert or an advisor or a consultant and say, I know how to code mobile apps, and start offering things that don't include you actually coding on every single project. So you could offer higher level services or productized services that are, again, productized services kind of out of the scope of this. We talk about them in the pricing seminar for a week, but the idea is that you've got a fixed price, a fixed scope service that you offer at a fixed price. And you can put it on your website and say, it's $5,000 for, a 3-screen app design, or whatever price makes sense for whatever scope that you think. And then you can, that's going to stand way out from something like, we'll code whatever you want. Tell us what to do. It's $150 an hour. So, you have to find something that's different. It could be that you hyper specialize in something like, AR kit, maybe. Just off the top of my head, there's probably already dozens and maybe hundreds of people to do that. But you could specialize in AR kit. You could specialize in MMO, like massively multiplayer games. You could specialize in casual games. You could specialize in children's apps. You could specialize in all of those sorts of things, or you could specialize in a vertical or some sort of target market, which could be defined as a vertical like healthcare. It could be defined as a psychographic like mission-driven businesses, or people who are into what's the word? Tree huggers is what I'm trying not to say. People who care about the environmentalists. That's what I'm trying to say. So you could specialize in different ways. You gotta get away from the crowd. You have to stand out from the crowd, or you're always going to be competing on price, because that's the only thing the buyer can see as a difference between you and all the other people huddled together in this giant crowd on TopTal. So like, oh, here's a list of people that do iOS development. We know we need iOS development. Let's sort by price and pick somebody that seems like halfway decent in the middle. You have to get out of that blob, that slurry, undifferentiated developers, and do something specific where you can carve out. There's a very small pond, but you carve out a niche where you're like, I'm the obvious choice. I'm like the only choice here. I'm the only person that specializes in doing this kind of work for these kind of people. Let's see. How are we doing here? Okay, getting through them. Still got 99 people here, so I'll keep going. Let's see here. Okay, here's a quick one. Can you talk about software maintenance proposals? Okay, so I have another webinar called The Altitude of Involvement, and you can find that at jonathanstark.com/altitude, I think, and it's probably also public here in Crowdcast somewhere if you search under my account for Altitude, and where I talk about the difference, the different altitudes, the different levels of involvement you can have with a client. The basement floor is support and maintenance. The middle tier is implementation or building or execution, and the top tier is strategy or design or planning or advice, those sorts of things. The farther up you go, the more valuable the service is. But there are a lot of nuances in there, because selling just strategy engagements is pretty hard when you're just starting out. So you might have to start and work your way up. Another thing is that strategy engagements typically aren't recurring. They usually aren't recurring. Sometimes you can get advisory retainers that go for a while, but generally a strategy engagement isn't recurring. It's just very high value. So you can get a lot of money for it, but you're not doing them every day of the week. Where if you've got a team of people who are qualified to do support on some applications that you built, then it might make sense to do support and orient your entire business around a support model. But I wouldn't do a proposal for it. To me, that's purely that's a subscription model where they subscribe to some level of service until they don't want it anymore. And I wouldn't really, to me, that's more of like a 3 options type of thing, where it's like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support contracts, and the price is preset, and you just do it like that. And it's more of a volume game. You probably need to have like a bunch of customers to do it. Steve Toms, no way. How's it going, Steve? Haven't seen that name in a while. Let's see here. I'm going back to the top, and let's see. All right. Dennis. So this maybe explains your other question a little bit. What's your idea on a one-page proposal? Okay. So by this, I take it to mean the sort of like almost like a SaaS model, where you've got like one page where it's got small, medium, and large. They're right next to each other, like a comparison chart. And I know Blair talks about this. I've never used this, but I'm positive that it works. But you still are going to have. I feel like it needs to be presented in person though, which is also something I never did. I always wrote up the 5-page sort of narrative, just text, and emailed it. I didn't walk people through it. If you're going to do this 1-page thing with stuff grayed out or whatever, I think you need to present it live. There are going to be too many questions. And I'm sure it works. Like if that's your jam and you feel like you want to close that sale like live and like say, all right, that's it. Option 3. Okay, great. I'll send over the stuff to sign, and just use that 1-page. I don't know if I'd call it a proposal, but this 1-page price sheet, really a comparison chart of small, medium, and large and the prices. Then they can talk through what's included and what the benefits are. If you're good on your feet and you're good talking like that, and you're not as good at written communications, that could be a great way to go. I think that's probably a really good idea. It's just not something I've ever done. I've always just written it up in sort of long form and send it over, and then possibly have some follow up on email. Yeah. Okay. And then some of these complaints about that people have with proposals. Okay, here's a good one. Large client would look at a technology consultant like me as a single point of failure because if I'm not available for some reason, like health issues or vacation, how can they rely on hiring me? All right, so that indicates to me that you're planning on being. First of all, I don't know if this is hypothetical or not. The way it's phrased sounds a little hypothetical, but that might just be a lost in translation thing. Let's say it's not hypothetical. Then what you're looking for is shorter term engagement. So like if you're an expert on, I don't know, React Native for web, and somebody has picked that platform and they're going to move forward with it with like 2 internal developers who've never used it before, then you'd say to them, look, and it could be like a Fortune 50 retailer, it could be some department, marketing department inside of that's doing like a holiday app, and they need to get it out for iOS and Android really fast, and also the web really fast. So they pick this platform. You're an expert at it. You wrote the book. You speak at conferences. If they miss this deadline, they're in big trouble. This is one of those deadlines that's real because it needs to be out before the holidays. And then you meet with them. One of the options that you can say is like, look, I'm not going to build this for you, but maybe I'll give you the starter files. You can have this free training documents that I've already created for my course or for my book. I'll do a boot camp with your 2 developers. It'll take a day or 2 days. With these, given that and the starter files and the quick start, all this stuff that I'm giving you, the boilerplate, they're going to hit the ground running. They're not going to make any fundamental errors. And then I'll oversee the work. Maybe I'll review pull requests or whatever, but they don't need you all the time. They don't need you sitting in a chair 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You just need to be on Slack or something, or, occasionally answer a question after that initial kickoff. And you could easily charge $10,000 for that, or whatever. I mean, you could, for the right client that values this and it's really urgent and they waited too long to do it and they've made these decisions about a platform choice, they're kind of stuck at that point. So somebody's either going to be in big trouble, not get a bonus, maybe get fired or at least reprimanded or demoted or whatever. They've written some checks with their mouth that they can't actually cash. So now you get pulled in to mitigate that risk for them. You don't need to be, available 24/7 or even just during business hours, because you're just popping in, if you know what I mean. It's like asynchronous kind of engagement. You're not showing up with a butt in a seat. So you could certainly get around this by tailor. For instance, if you travel a lot and you have weird hours or something like that, and you're not normally available during business hours, then just tailor your offerings to suit that. Shorter term offerings that are asynchronous and just need like a 24-hour response time or something like that. Yeah. Ooh, here's a classic one. All right, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. Do you have a standard MSA PSA service agreement that you supply if asked in addition to the proposal? No, the only paperwork I give is the proposal, and I've been yelled at by everybody. Anybody who's slightly more legally minded than me has raked me over the coals for this for years and years, and someday it'll probably bite me, but it never has. And I'm just more of a handshake guy. I don't work with people who I don't like and that I don't trust. And I think if things go wrong, even when there is a contract, especially when I was working with Fortune 500s, I couldn't win. Even if I won, I would lose. Like, there's no way for me to defend anything in a contract. It's nice to have paperwork that everybody can look back to say like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what we agreed to. Like, I forgot, or, I thought about writing it one way and I wrote it another way, or they misread something. It's great to be clear about what's involved and what the desired outcome is and all of that stuff. That's all in the proposal in my world. Additional stuff with all this others. I mean, I know plenty of people that do it. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't do it. You can do it, but I'm not a lawyer. So ask a lawyer about it. Get some boilerplate somewhere. But I don't do it. I've never done it. And knock on wood, it's never bit me. Oops. Yeah, so for me, it's just the proposal. Is there a good way to present the proposal to the client? I don't like to just send the proposal without presenting it. Yeah, if you're comfortable presenting it, go ahead. I would probably, it feels weird to me to to take my format and just sort of read them through it. It's too much text. So I'd probably go with that one-page format where maybe you've got notes for yourself that kind of amounts to what my proposal would have been. So you probably write up all that stuff as part of your narrative or your presentation. Like your current situation is this, your desired outcome is that, your desired future state is that. My contribution to this, you brought me in to talk about this because you know that I'm an expert and I wrote the book on this and blah, blah, blah. So here are the three options. And then you present the thing to them on the spot, probably not in advance, and you walk them through the differences between each of the prices, the differences between each of the options and why that might justify each of the prices. So yeah, if you want to do it like that, I think that's fine. I know plenty of people who that works for. It's just not how I've done it. The thing that I worry about when people talk about this, though, this is one thing to keep in mind, is it's not the sale. That's not the sale. The sale happens in the sales interview. That's really the sale to me. All the hard work goes there. If you're trying to do any kind of persuading or convincing at that point when you're presenting this thing with them and you're not willing to just walk away if they don't pick any of them, you haven't really done all of your homework. So I guess that's the one thing I would say, is that where people maybe didn't have a thorough enough sales interview up front, and they're going to try and fix that by doing a song and dance while they present the options. So that's not great. So as long as you're comfortable, you're like, hey, these are three options. You can pick any one of them or none of them, and it's fine with me either way. I'm just here to answer your questions about what are the benefits of each of these options, what is included and what's not included. And you're almost just there as like someone to answer questions about the thing that they're looking at. I would never try and sell it at that point. It's just another pitch, but now you have prices. These are good questions. This is great. How do you handle a client who doesn't know exactly what they need, even if you know you can help them in some capacity? Well, I don't know how you would know that if they don't know what they need. I think maybe what you mean is that they don't value what you do, or I don't know why they would be talking to you. But okay, let's just say they don't know what they don't know, and a friend of theirs knows that you do good work and they said you guys should talk. I don't know if that's really a prospect yet, and I wouldn't have a sales meeting with them yet, but what you could do, this is one of those cases where it might make sense to present them with a paid roadmap or strategy session or workshop or something like that, where someone's like, I don't know, they're like a doctor and they've got an idea for an app and they see this like opening in the marketplace, but they don't know, like there's a need for like an insulin tracking application for some hardware device. And they're just like, they have this vague sense that there's some opportunity there, and like, I don't know, I figured I should talk to a designer. I figured I should talk to an app developer. So that's why we're talking. And it's really new. It's almost like startup phase or something. At that point, you might want to pitch 3 different levels of discovery or 3 different levels of research and planning or R&D, that kind of thing. Or perhaps this would be a time to create a productized service on the spot and say, I've got this productized service, or I'll put together this beta service just for you. Let's try it and see how it goes. I'll give you a discounted rate in exchange for feedback about the process and improvements that I could make on it. But, so the word that's getting me here is need. They don't know exactly what they need. The word need is hanging me up. I wish it said, how do you handle a client who doesn't know exactly what they want? Which would be the outcome. So they know, which is almost impossible. I feel like there's some kind of disconnect here. Maybe if Ashley is still here, she could kind of clarify a little bit. But clients always know what they want. Like, what outcome do they? If they can't figure out what outcome that they want, then you're either talking to the wrong person, or they are definitely going to be a bad client. Constantly changing the goalposts. When a good client knows what they want. You sit down and they're like, what are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to increase sales. I'm like, well, why are you talking to me? I can't increase your sales. Well, you're a conversion rate optimization expert, right? Yeah. Well, if we could increase our conversion rate, our sales will definitely go up. You'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, I can probably do that. Like, business people know what they want. the need thing feels a little prescriptive to me. So that's why it's kind of hanging me up. But if you're talking to someone who's not a business person, then I could sort of see this question. So you're talking to someone who's like maybe got a full-time job, or there's some other kind of professional and they've got this idea for a startup or something. That's a different can of worms because the business doesn't even exist yet. It's almost like a B2C sale and not a B2B sale. So, oh, good. Yeah, people starting from square one. Yeah, I'd probably come up with some kind of innovation workshop, productized service, like whatever it is that you do. I don't know. You can tell me in the chat. But whatever it is that you do, you could come up with this sort of discovery thing that's the same price for everyone, and go after these people who are entrepreneurs or wantrepreneurs that are in the healthcare space, trying to come up with an app or digital service or an Alexa skill or something like that. And you have this sort of like fixed price, fixed scope productized service that they can just go to your website, $3,000. Email me if you have questions, or you can just buy it right here and set up a kickoff meeting, and then we'll work through it however your process goes. Yeah. So that's it's more of a B2C sale there. It's not really a project. It's more like R&D or design or some kind of upfront discovery. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it seems like a roadmap might be a good fit in a case like that. You could also have a ton of free material for people like this that you use as content marketing, where someone comes to you and say, I don't know what to do. I feel like I need everything. I don't know what to do first. You say, well, go through my free email course, go download my free ebook, go take this cheap course I put on Udemy, and it's like $49. It's exactly what you need. And you can kind of turn them into someone over time that actually does know what they need and is then ready to spend more money with you because they got positive ROI from the initial investments that they made, those smaller investments that they made. So you could build trust with them over time by giving them highly leveraged offerings that scale really well and don't require your direct attention. Okay. Ooh, here's another good one. I'm starting to offer a new service and want to get feedback on prices. Should I create a sample proposal to get feedback on potential customers in my market? Okay, so from the sound of this, it would be a productized service, because it would need to be, if you want feedback on prices, it needs to be repeatable. Otherwise, what would be the point of the feedback? At least that's my assumption. So a lot of times what you can do is run a beta with 3 customers in exchange for either free or very heavily discounted, in exchange for feedback and testimonials if they like the way the service went. And that's a sure bet. Like it takes obviously some time, but if it is a productized service, it should be relatively short, like not too time intensive, like maybe, anywhere from 1 to 5, maybe 10 hours spread out over a week or 2 weeks. So it's not a huge investment on your part. You'll get tons of feedback from these first 3 beta customers. At the end, you can say, well, if that would be, if that had been $1,000, if that had been $5,000, would you still have been happy with the outcome? And if they say, oh yeah, absolutely, I'd recommend to anybody in my situation that they pay you $5,000 for that, then, you've got a good price. Or maybe it's too low, but you'll get that sort of reaction from them after having gone through that. And if you're planning on targeting similar people in the future, then that's pretty reasonable feedback. Versus what some other people do, it'd be like, hey, I've got this service. How much would you pay for it? That's like, they're always going to skew low because they don't really understand the service, because they haven't gone through it yet. They don't understand what the benefits are. You probably don't have the messaging right on it yet because it's new. And so they're automatically going to be like, I don't know, $100, and you're planning on charging $10,000. So beta it with a few people who are your ideal buyers. That's a whole story, how to connect with them. Again, it's in the pricing seminar. But you do that, and then you get real feedback from actual clients, and then you've got testimonials for your sales page. So it's really good all the way around. So you're not doing it for free or cheap. You're doing it in exchange for feedback and testimonials. Oh, classic one. Okay. How do you convert intangible metrics from the why conversation into measurable value, a price in your proposal? This is an art, not a science, but you have to get the client to tell you. They need to give you some kind of indication why they would spend so much money with an expert like you when they could just do it in-house, or they could just do it some cheaper way, or why not do this project? And it's always going to be a kind of squishy number. You're going to be guesstimating. A lot of times, because I built software, a lot of times the guess was based on how many people they would have to hire to do a process manually. And I'd be like, why don't you just hire 5 people to do the data entry? And they'd be like, no way, we're not doing that. Or we would have to hire 5 people to do this. So I'm like, okay, so then if I charge them the price of one person and they can continue to use this system for years, there's tons of value there. So there's always a way. So if they know that things are wrong, current situation, and they know that they have a desired future state, they can tell the difference between those two things. So when you ask, what would a home run look like? How are we going to know we hit a home run? They'll say, well, our conversion rate will have doubled, or my employees won't be lined up outside my door complaining about how bad their manager is. It could be, that's intangible. Morale, let's say, or management skills. These things are very intangible. Like most things are intangible, but they know it's broken. And the reason they know it's broken is because they're looking at something, and you need to figure out what it is that they're looking at. What's the needle that's telling them that something's broken? And if they say, oh, well, I've got people in my office twice a day complaining about whatever, that's X, Y, and Z, and be like, well, maybe it's a culture problem, or, who knows? Like, how would you know if I can't, I'm confident I can fix this because I'm an expert at managing dev teams or something like that. You got all these problems. I can, in my head, I'm like, yeah, I can help with this based on what I've just learned here. I'm like, how would you know if we hit a home run? He'd be like, oh, nobody would be complaining in my office anymore. Oh, how many people are complaining now? Oh, I'm getting 2 people a day. I'm like, okay, if we got that down to like 1 person a week, would that be a win? And the person's like, oh, that would be amazing. So now you found something to measure because they are measuring something. That's why they're talking to you. It could be something weird and intangible, but they are measuring it. So you just got to figure out what it is, and then it becomes tangible. How do you price it? That becomes squishy. It's more art than science, but you only have to get into a order of magnitude ballpark, like within 10x of the right number, because your 3 options are going to be such a small fraction of that, or at least your option 1 is going to be such a small fraction of that you could be way off on the value number and still have an acceptable price at a tenth of what the value is. So there's just a lot of wiggle room there. And if that makes you uncomfortable because of all the uncertainty, just think of how squishy an hourly estimate is, where you're taking a number that you made up, which is your hourly rate, completely pulled it out of thin air. Like, I think people charge this, I'll just charge that. And then you multiply it by a number of hours that you think something's going to take, which is based on incomplete information, like a couple of hours of conversation at most. So you've got a number, a guesstimate based on incomplete information multiplied by a number that you made up. So that's pretty squishy too, even though there's a formula and you can point to the formula, the numbers that are going into it are just out of thin air. So both are kind of thin air numbers, but I like the value pricing one better because it at least includes the client in the calculation, where hourly doesn't. All right, I can feel myself soapboxing. I'll move on to the next one. Still have 84 people here. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Here's one from Sherry. If we ask them what a win is and their answer involves something we cannot control beyond making the product or service enticing, we don't control what the customer will ultimately decide to do. Like if they like the client's podcast, we can't say we can guarantee those wins. No, you can't. Well, let me finish reading. I can help them work toward those goals, but I'm leery of making a guarantee because I feel like there's no perfect guarantee to anything super specific. Would be disingenuous of me to promise. Right. So what Sherry's bringing up here is the difference between upstream and downstream. So what she does is upstream from this downstream effect. So you need to ask the client. This is where what the client believes your contribution will be. You make them convince you that the piece that you're going to work on is going to be valuable to them. And if you can talk them out of hiring you, then great. You probably dodged a bullet. But they're probably, since they're talking to you, they're probably going to say, well, I just believe that if I don't contract with someone who's going to do this beautiful stuff up front, then it's probably going to stink, or I'm not going to consider this a win, or it's not going to catch on. So in other words, in their mind, like let's say a beautiful podcast art is important. Well, why is it important? Why don't you just make something up in Canva yourself? I don't want to do that. I wouldn't trust it. All right. So you got to get it out of them. Because if they don't see a connection to it, then you're setting yourself up for like scope creep, because they know something's wrong. They know there's something they want from you. And if you can't get them to articulate something that you feel like you can control, that's where you get these weird micromanaging clients who are like, well, try this, make the logo bigger, or do this, flip that around, use different typeface, because they haven't articulated even to themselves what it is that they think they want, and they're just going to end up bossing you around. So if you can come to an agreement on what it is that they believe is your contribution and how it's causally connected to this outcome that they want, if you can't get them to do that, I'd be reluctant to take on the project. That said, I don't know if maybe this isn't a project. Maybe this is a productized service that you just say, hey, it's $500 a month. Take it or leave it. This is what you can expect from us. That's not value pricing, but it does disconnect your time from your money. So you've ditched hourly billing using either a subscription model or a fixed price productized service model. But so you don't really need to go through any of this stuff because it's not really a project. A project is this sort of like collaborative enterprise between the two businesses that probably takes months, but it has a beginning, a middle, and end. It's not an ongoing service arrangement. It's not a subscription. It's a project that has an end. And if it has an end, you have to know when you're done. And if you don't know what the success criteria is, there's no end. And if you give a fixed price, that will kill you. So you need to know in a project situation, when you give a fixed price, you need to know what the success criteria is, what the home run is. Otherwise, you're taking on too much risk and you're opening yourself up for scope creep. So great question. Thanks for that one. Looks like a clarification. Sorry, my question was misleading. What I meant is, it's one and the same project, and we are a service provider for one part of the project design and others do development. If all service providers charge 10% of the value, the client wouldn't make money. How do I calculate only our contribution to the overall product? I feel like I kind of just answered that one, and you're also creating a hypothetical that probably would not exist. All the service providers are not going to charge 10% of the value. And even if they did, there's probably not 10 service providers. So, but it's probably the other service providers are going to bill hourly, honestly. I mean, maybe someday my mission will come true, but most people still charge hourly. And if you are doing a particular piece of it, you have the client explain to you why they think your piece is important. Why are they talking to someone like you to contribute to this project? They must think there's some connection between what you do and their ultimate desired outcome. Even if it's way upstream, that it's there, or they wouldn't be wasting their time. So you talk to them, and if it's a good client, if it's going to be a good fit, they're going to be like, well, we just believe that we're a design-driven organization. We believe that design is super important. You guys are leading people in the field for this kind of a thing. We want to work with the best because this is a high-risk project for us. You're like, okay, I'm convinced. They see a connection between what we do and the outcome. Yeah, and again, you calculate your contribution, assuming it's a project, and assuming that they have connected the dots for you in terms of why they think it's important to hire an expensive designer to contribute to this. Your numbers don't have to be anywhere near exact. They just need to be in the ballpark. So if you calculate the value is roughly 100 grand, then 10 grand is only a tenth of that. And your two other options are going to prevent you from leaving too much money on the table with a price that's way too low. So you give them options. So if you think it's 100 grand and you give them three options, 10, 22, and 50, and they pick 10, well, that 100 might have not been quite right. If they pick number 3 and they spend 50 out of, what you guessed was 100, probably the value is probably a lot higher to them and you underestimated it. But between the inherent squishiness of the value calculation, that sort of problem is mitigated by the fact that you're giving them 3 options and they're, at most like 50%, only half of the value. So they give you $1, they get $2 back. So all of those are potentially a good deal if you're even in the ballpark. So it's, it's not an exact science, but there's so much wiggle room that it works. Oh, great question. BG, thank you for this. Do you practice price anchoring and set the first option to be the highest? I don't, but I do. So I do price anchor. Usually in the desired future state, I will include a number of some kind that is related to the desired outcome. It could be that I'm only contributing to, a tiny piece of that, or it's an ultimate sales increase and I'm not doing everything, but I'm doing a piece. And ultimately they believe that my contribution could lead to or contribute to that bigger number, like increase of sales of $2 million per year. That number will appear in the situation appraisal piece of the proposal. So it's like your current state is you're losing $100 million a year, whatever, like some current state, desired future state that has some kind of number in it, hopefully extrapolated into a dollar amount. So they see a dollar sign or whatever your currency is. They see a dollar sign. It says $2 million. They go, that's the price. And they go, oh, no, wait a second. All right. Yeah, I mean, maybe we can make 2 million out of this. He's probably exaggerating. It's probably more like 1 million. But now they're thinking about the value of the potential outcome. And then when they get down to your prices that are like $20,000, I do lowest to highest, but I do because it's just really hard to do it in a narrative way. Highest to lowest, it's really hard. So I would do it lowest to highest, but I've anchored previously against the value. I'm not anchoring the options against each other primarily. Primarily, it's about the value that I've calculated roughly on the back of a napkin and included in the thing. And even if your calculation's wrong, they'll mentally adjust in their head. Like, well, 2 million is not right, but it's probably $1 million. So now they're thinking $1 million in their head. So when they see your prices, they're going to seem low compared to that high price anchor. I'm really glad you asked that. Let's see. How much time do you allow before a proposal expires? It's basically always 2 weeks, unless there's like a holiday or something, or people are going to be on vacation or something like that. But generally 2 weeks, 10 business days. If your option 1 is a needs analysis, how do you create an option 2 value? So sometimes when the first piece, so if you have a business that is brand new or not even a business yet, and they don't even know what they want, and it's very R&D driven, I'd probably just sell them a productized service out of the gate, something that's fixed scope, fixed price, and it's just like some kind of audit or roadmap or whatever makes the most sense. And then say, we'll talk about we'll do this to answer all of these questions that you couldn't answer in the sales interview. Basically, you go in the sales interview and you ask all these questions, and they're like, I don't know. So you say, look, let's pause here. You're not really ready to do a build. You're not ready to do a project. You're not really ready to engage and invest a ton of money in this. Let's instead of doing that and blowing a ton of money, firing before we aim, let's carve off a small engagement first where we do discovery. We talk to your employees or your clients or your customers or whoever we need to talk to, your executive management, the stakeholders. We research the market. We do this. We'll put together a report. We'll bring back findings. We'll make suggestions, and we'll give you 3 ways that you could move forward from there. So if you're talking to someone who's in a really immature early stage, then you could do that. But I would not do that for free. So if you need to come up with something like that, and it could be maybe like, if the build was like an iOS app, and I wouldn't touch an iOS app for less than $150,000, I'd say something like, for like $7,000, we can do a needs analysis, and it'll include these different things. That's how much it is. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I'm not going to start coding or something unless you have the answers to these questions, because that would just be like highway robbery. So that can happen. I've been told never to send my proposal, always present it with them over the phone or in person. Is that true? I mean, for 15 years, I was closing 6-figure deals by sending a PDF via email. So, it works both ways. I think it works both ways. We talked about the 1-page thing with the 3 options. I think it works both ways. I know it does. So you can do it whatever way you're most comfortable. Pricing. What if the client says early on, I've done some research and I think it should cost X or Y, but I don't really know yet. Okay, I have an entire book on this called Learn Your Lines. This is a common objection, and you can just dismantle it really easily. So you just start asking them questions about it, and and if you can't get them out of it, they will be a horrible client. So if you can't untangle them from this, you say something like, I've done some research. All right, what did you do research on? Like what? because they're already self-diagnosing. They're deciding they need a web developer. They're deciding they need a copywriter. They're deciding they need a white paper or a video. And if you are, so one thing you could say is like, well, yeah, that's how much that thing costs, but are you positive that's what you need? And if they say yes, then you're like, all right, go hire someone cheap. All of the high value stuff that you could possibly offer to them, like strategy, planning, design, all of that stuff is off the table because they're not open to that. And not everybody is going to be open to that. So just let somebody else deal with them. But you ended with, but I don't really know yet, and be like, all right, well, let's talk about it and find out. I don't want you to run off and buy that thing, which seems maybe like a deal, and it turns out it doesn't solve your problem. We haven't even talked about what your problem is. It's like somebody saying like, oh, the triple bypass should cost this much. And it's like, well, how do you know you need a triple bypass? Would you like to talk to me and see if like maybe you don't need one? So that would be a red flag for me. You can possibly talk them out of it if they're potentially a good client. They'll be like, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. I just did some research. And you're like, well, yeah, there's some cheaper options out there. You could even find cheaper ones. Go on Craigslist, go on Fiverr. There's probably cheaper ones than you even found. But if you're looking for something high quality, or you really want to de-risk this, or you want to do it right the first time and not have to do it again later, then you'd look at somebody like me, which is much more expensive, and it's going to give you more personal attention, take your business into account, so on and so forth. Okay. Wow, there's really still 77 people here. That's amazing. Okay, so let's see. This one is this was an answer to my chat question earlier. What are your thoughts on a whole business built on 3 incremental productized service options that move the same needle? Would you approach the sales interview and proposal the same way? I mean, if you had that, you wouldn't need to have sales interviews at all. You've got prices. So you got 3 prices, small, medium, and large. It's kind of, it's 3 options, but it's take it or leave it. It's like not customized, and you need to be pretty sophisticated in order to create these things. So it takes some work to set them up. But once you do, they're very repeatable. They're very controllable. And the audience is going to self-segment based on the prices and what they believe the benefits to be. So they'll look at the benefits and say, yeah, that's totally worth $5,000, or that's totally worth $50,000. So you don't even have to have a sales interview. You might have to answer a couple of questions, but you don't have to have the whole why conversation or any of that stuff, because it's like pre-baked. You've found a segment of people that are all value this kind of an outcome or this benefit or this service a particular way, and you just keep selling it to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. So that's a great place to get to, and it'd be fabulous. Actually, I think that's a great idea. It can be a little tricky to get there, though. And dun, 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 the last question. So before I answer this one, let me just thank everybody for coming, and thank you for staying around for so long. This is amazing. And we will just answer this and let you know one more time that this replay will be available for a couple days anyway. It won't be up forever. And if you want to go to the pricing seminar and find out more about all of the other weeks other than just this first week of proposal stuff, then I'd love for you to check that out too. Don't forget the coupon code is Bluebird if you want a discount. And the final answer from Sherry again. One of your examples was something like you could tell them, I can definitely double your opt-in rate for downloads of a lead magnet. But is that something you detail in your proposal? Because if you promise a double opt-in number and then the percentage after a specific amount of time actually almost doubles but doesn't quite reach that, then they can say you didn't live up to your proposal. Yeah. So you want to guarantee something that you feel like you can guarantee. So don't make promises you don't think you can reach. So you be conservative here. And it depends on what your guarantee is. Like, is the guarantee a refund? Maybe not. Is the guarantee that you'll keep working on it until it's there, or whatever? There's all different kinds of guarantees. If you Google jonathenstark.com guarantees, there's I have a bunch of articles on it. Different kinds of things warrant different kinds of guarantees. The purpose for using a guarantee is to decrease the amount of risk that the person is feeling, and to make them accept a higher price, because you're just decreasing the risk. If you just want to say no guarantees, this is what I'm going to shoot for, you believe I'm an expert, your prices can't be as high as if you said, I guarantee I'll at least increase this by 1%. And if they're cool with that, and you would feel like horrible at your job if you couldn't move the thing 1%, and you maybe want to give them their money back anyway because you feel like, geez, I really did a terrible job. I was completely unable to do that, and I was so sure I'd be able to. I need to like take a step back and figure out what went on here. It's a good learning moment for you. And if your prices, if it didn't take you 6 months and you have to return 100 grand, you don't want to. You have to be careful with guarantees. But if you have no confidence that you can improve their condition, I'd be like, well, maybe you shouldn't take it on. Or you can be super clear about that up front with them. Like, look, I don't know. You guys have everything really tuned up nicely. Maybe I can improve it by 1%. I can't even guarantee that. But if you want to engage with me, this is the price for that. So the guarantee is something that it doesn't have to be just 100% money back guarantee. Like you can include that in the pricing. You can include that in the conversation. So you want to do something, you only want to be taking on projects that you're confident you can improve their condition in some way that matters to them. And I feel like if you're doing that, there's some sort of guarantee that you would offer implicitly anyway. Like if you really screwed up really bad and the conversion rate went down or something, and you're like, yeah, that's my fault. I A/B tested that and it went with B when it should have went with A. That's my bad. I'm imagining a lot of people who really screwed up would, if assuming they could afford to, would probably want to give the money back. But it doesn't always have to be money back. It could be a satisfaction guarantee where you work for an extra 3 months. We'll do this. After a certain point in time, we'll do this for 3 months, let's say. I think it'll take a lot less time than that. But if it goes to 3 months and we still haven't gotten there, I'll do an additional 2 months. And if it doesn't work, then it can't be done. But I want you to know that up front. So you can customize the guarantee to whatever the situation is and whatever your level of confidence is. But the more risk you take on, the higher your price can and should be, because it could blow up in your face in the way that you deal with the risk of really, if you have a lot of high risk projects, you want to have a lot of projects so that if one blows up, you're still getting a lot of money from other customers to kind of like cover that shortfall. Okay, so hopefully that helps. There is no way to download this that I'm aware of. There's probably some Chrome plugin that will allow you to download the video, but there isn't a way to download it. So you just have to come back here. The URL will be the same as you see here, and it will be up for a couple of days. If you want to come back, if you want to share it with somebody, that's totally fine too. And yeah, just wow. I mean, thanks again for coming. Just like almost 300 people signed up, and we had, I don't know what the peak was, but there's a ton of people in here. Lots of great questions. And hey, I hope to see some of you in the pricing seminar. It's more of this stuff, but productized services and podcasting and mailing lists and sales funnels and all the other things in positioning that go around this project proposal piece. Okay, I will see you all online somewhere. Hit me up on Twitter. Keep adding comments here. Thanks again for joining. And yeah, look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Thank you, Riley. Let's see. Cool. Have a good one.